So, first up, no. Our first 6-minute building story speaker is a friend of mine, Angela Keppel. Angela is an urban planner and historian, a lifelong Buffalonian. She lives in the juxtaposition between where we've been and where we're going as a city. For the past 8 years, she has run the blog Discovering Buffalo, One Street at a Time, where she uncovers the stories of Buffalo's streets. She works as a project planner with Buffalo Place, Inc., the downtown business district. She holds a BA from Niagara University and a master's in urban planning from UB. She serves as program volunteer at the Buffalo History Museum and is on the boards of Ready Bike Share, Hostel Buffalo Niagara, and Hostel Buffalo Niagara. She lives at the Hotel Lafayette and can often be seen exploring Buffalo on her bicycle, named after her favorite Buffalonian, Samuel Wilkinson. Angela?
Hi, my name is Angela Keppel, and I am the Buffalo Streets girl. So my building story is actually about the stories of what happens between the buildings. So Buffalo streets really lay out our history of our city and our region and really tell the story. So my first street was Cedar Ave. It was named after the tree. My second street was Gettsville Road. I remember having to explain that I didn't live in Gettsville, I lived in Snyder, which were two hamlets in the town of Amherst. So I wanted to learn why my street was named Gettsville. And it turns out that it was originally the street that led from Snyder to Gettsville, so it was called Gettsville Road. So eventually, I wanted to know why Keppel Street got its name. I started to research, and I learned all these stories, so I started to blog about the streets. It's been 8 years, and I still don't know who Keppel Street is named after, so if anyone has any ideas, let me know. But I have learned a lot. Buffalo streets were originally laid out by Joseph Ellicott, who worked for the Holland Land Company. He laid out the streets in a radial grid, so the streets all center around Niagara Square like spokes on the wheel. He named the streets for Native American tribes and animals found nearby, and the investors who made up the Holland Land Company. While all of this was going on, there was a second village getting laid out further north at the junction of the Niagara River and Lake Erie. Peter Porter laid out the village and named it Black Rock. The streets here formed a grid and were named after the 13 original colonies and the numbers 1 through 20. Eventually, the two grids of Buffalo and Black Rock grew together and became one city. One of the most common questions I get are, why are the numbered streets on the west side so weird? They're missing some of them. It's because when Buffalo annexed Black Rock, they changed the names of a lot of the streets, and so the numbers that are left are just streets that we still have to change the name. So one of the streets that got changed was 10th Street, became Fargo Avenue. William Fargo was a businessman who worked in shipping. He created Wells Fargo and American Express. He lived in a lavish home at the corner of Fargo and Jersey. The house was the most expensive in the city and cost about what would be $10 million today. Fell Alley is named after the engineer and doctor who invented the electric chair, Dr. George Fell. Dr. Fell also invented the Fell motor to resuscitate unconscious patients, which at the time was thought to be impossible. Dr. Fell worked on the electric chair because he thought it would minimize the pain of the death. Walden Ave is named after Ebenezer Walden. Mr. Walden studied law in Massachusetts and came to Buffalo in 1806, where he walked the 40 miles from Batavia. He was the first lawyer to come to Buffalo. He quickly realized there were not enough people to need a full-time lawyer, so he got a job working as a clerk in a store. Dart Street on the west side is named after Joseph Dart, who invented the grain elevator. He came to Buffalo in 1841. He worked in a fur shop. He decided there was a better way to store grain, and so he invented the grain elevator and built the first one a year later. He refused to patent his invention. He chose for it to be a gift to all. Wasmuth Avenue is named after Carolyn Wasmuth. She was the first female land developer in Buffalo. She was a part of the Buffalo Land Association, which developed properties in the Genesee Walden District and Ontario Land Company in Cheektowaga. She also had a stand at the Elk Street Market where she sold berries. A bunch of streets near Kensington Bailey were named after Harold Bickford and members of his family. Legend holds that he divorced his wife and left Toronto to come start a new life in Buffalo. Eventually, he regretted it and named the streets for his family: Alice, Phyllis, Martha, Gail, Millicent, Edith, Godfrey, Leonard, Kay, and Janet. Lafayette Avenue is not a church street, but it is named after a church. The Presbyterian Church was originally located on Lafayette Square in 1833. They had several names and then settled on Lafayette Presbyterian Church. In 1894, they moved northward to their current location, and they took the name with them. Ripley Place is a little street that's named after a strong woman, Mary Ripley. Mary was a teacher at Central High School in 1861. There had been riots at the school. Miss Ripley decided to take over the class. The men who hired her were like, yeah, whatever, and they thought she would quit. She managed to turn the class around. Howard Street is named after Rufus Howard. Mr. Howard helped invent the lawnmower in 1851. He provided capital to manufacture the machine, which was called the Ketchum motor, at Howard Iron Works on Chicago Street. They were bought out by J.D. Cousins, which is still in business today on Tift. Holland Avenue is a street that you'd think is named after a place. Rather, it's named after Nelson Holland. Mr. Holland worked in the lumber industry and owned 4,000 acres of buffalo in western New York, 4 different lumber companies, and properties all the way to Texas. It is said that he cut and treated more pine lumber than any other man. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Catherine Smith. Miss Smith was a reporter who worked for the Buffalo Courier 75 years ago. She wrote a column in the newspaper that talked about people who got the streets named after them or their family members. She has been an important part of my research. She worked for the Courier for 48 years. Also, she was blind. That was her at her Braille typewriter. So get outside, go for a walk, look at the street names, and think about Buffalo stories. And for more information, you can go to buffalostreets.com.